Welcome to the Love Intervention. I'm Mrs. Evans.
I'm Pastor Evans.
And today we'll be continuing our series on premarital counseling. Our focus is sex. So today I wanted to share a quote that I think fits the subject well. On the whole, human beings are fascinated with sex. Men and women, young and old. Christians, atheists, and everyone in between. In all cultures, throughout all history, sexual desire has been one of the greatest motivators of the human will. Men and women throw away their families, houses, money, and land in order to be sexually satisfied. Some are addicted to it. Wars have been fought over it. We compose songs about it, make movies about it, and write stories about it. And this preoccupation with sex is not simply a facet of our fallen nature. Even one whole book of the Bible, the Song of Solomon, is dedicated to celebrating the sexual relationship between the husband and wife.
Well, then it's important that we have this conversation today, huh?
I believe so.
Right. So our question for today is, how important is sex to you in marriage?
Okay.
And what value does sex have in your life?
So you're asking me this?
Of course.
Okay. So for me, sex is a very important part of marriage.
Yes.
Marriage is a living, breathing thing.
Right.
And so it's one facet that it needs to survive. For me, sex is number 10. Okay. Number 10. There are so many other things that are more important in my everyday life.
Right.
I do, like I said, believe it's important in marriage. However, I ain't gonna pass out. I'm gonna live.
Right.
I'm gonna live. But it is something that is important to me in my relationship, in my marriage, but it's just not top 5. It's top 10. It's in there.
It's in there? So you're differentiating between how important it is in a marriage or your marriage and in your overall life.
Right.
Very good. Okay. You said 10.
10!
That's fine. So, how important is sex in marriage?
To you.
To me.
Right.
Extremely important. God made sex for marriage.
Right.
And he expects us to engage and enjoy. So it's extremely important. It's I think what you said was accurate. It's a very vital part of your marriage relationship, and later in that episode we'll get into why that is.
Right.
But it's a very vital part of the marriage relationship, right? So extremely important in marriage. Probably.
What value?
What value? Just in life.
In your life.
In my life.
Right. Let's get right.
You want me to? Okay. So in my life. Considering you put it at 10 in your life.
Right.
Right. So my life is gonna hover right around 4. Yeah, because it's God. Then you and the things that you need.
Right.
Our kids and the things that they need, and all that means. And then it's sex.
Right. I think it would be important for us to note that although you put it 4th and I put it 10th,
right,
it doesn't mean that is conflict.
Right.
It just means that where we value it in our everyday life.
Right.
And so you and your spouse, or you and your significant other, can value it differently, and it not be something that has to come to conflict.
Right. It doesn't have to be an issue.
No.
It's just where you place it in everyday life.
Right.
Right. That doesn't mean that you don't have it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
It's communication that decides how you together figure out where it's
gonna land.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So we obviously think that this information is important.
Right.
For people that are preparing to get married, whether you are engaged already or not, whether you have a significant other or not, but you're getting ready, you're getting yourself ready for marriage. And for those people who are married, to go back over some things and make sure that you're growing together.
A refresh.
A refresh.
Right.
A refresh, right. So make sure that you're growing together and refreshing your relationship as you go.
Right.
So this is definitely for everybody. We say premarital counseling, but I think people think that you have to be engaged. You don't. It's just for everybody to get ready.
Right.
So this particular session about sex.
Okay.
This particular session about sex is important.
Right.
So why is it important?
Okay. So I was reading. I was trying to get my thoughts together.
Right.
When we were preparing for this particular subject.
Right.
And I was reading, and I found an article that put my thoughts together well. So the purposes for sex in marriage. Sex in Christian marriage is meant to be an expression of love.
Right.
So it's meant to be an expression of love. Sex in Christian marriage bonds you and your spouse. That's number 2. Mm-hmm. Sex in Christian marriage is a safeguard against sexual sin. And I want to say here that God ordained marriage.
Yes.
And he created sex to be something that was within marriage.
Right.
Okay, something that you did once you got married.
Right.
And so I think it's important for all those groups of people that you talked about to take a moment and contemplate to themselves the questions that we asked ourselves. What place does it play in marriage, or their idea of marriage? Where do they value it? And also, what's the purpose?
Right.
So that we can, you can, everybody can have a better understanding and idea of the purpose. So we're not just out here twerking and shirking.
Shirking?
Right.
Right, you made that. That's funny.
Right. Yeah. So we're not just out here doing all kinds of things.
Right.
So first, sex in Christian marriage is meant to be an expression of love. Mm-hmm. Sex is so important in a Christian marriage because it is an expression of love. And in the book of Proverbs 5:18-19, it says, "Let your fountain be blessed and rejoice in the wife of your youth, a lovely deer, a graceful doe." And it continues to go on. And really it's just a time for you to enjoy. Yeah. Like God created it so that you can enjoy.
Yes, he did.
Okay, but he also created it for procreation. Mm-hmm. But once you're done having kids in marriage,
it's still enjoyable.
Right. It's supposed to be enjoyable during that time too, right?
Right.
During the process of procreating, but also it's enjoyable.
Right.
So it's an expression of love.
I mean, I think one of the reasons, and this is me talking, I don't have any scriptural background for this, so if you're looking to find this in the Word, you probably not.
Okay.
I think one of the reasons that he made it enjoyable, because he didn't have to.
Right.
One of the reasons he made it enjoyable is so that you will want to do it, and so that you will be engaged in it and enjoy it, and especially after the fall of man.
Right. Because
that
thing could have went all wrong.
Right.
He was like, you gonna have childbirth and pain.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So especially after having childbirth in pain.
Right.
There had to be something.
Right.
That brings you back to it.
Right.
Right. So I think he created it that way so that it would be an enjoyable expression and a loving expression, and the vulnerableness that you have to put yourself into to be able to fully enjoy it.
Right.
Brings you closer together.
Which is why it's intended to be done in marriage.
Right.
Okay. Number 2, sex in Christian marriage bonds you with your spouse.
Yeah.
And it's so very important that we pay attention to this one thing, especially if we're not me, because I wasn't, for a lot of different reasons, I wasn't a virgin when we got married. But for those who are, understand that that is important, that you bond with your spouse, so that in that way, so that no one can say they've had the experience that you're having.
Right.
That makes it that much more special.
Right.
And we'll talk about some other things later.
Right.
But even if you have participated in a sexual relationship before, you can still start fresh, anew, and do things that you've never done before or experience in a different way because of the emotional connection that marriage creates. Mm-hmm. Okay? Sex in Christian marriage is a safeguard against sexual sin. Sex in marriage will protect you from pursuing sexual immorality outside of your marriage. Sex with your spouse is not the only way to overcome sexual sin, but it is something that can mitigate it.
Right. Yeah.
It mitigates it.
Yeah. Listen, God expects you to enjoy and engage with your spouse.
Right.
And if you're doing that, if you're enjoying each other, then there's less room for others to get involved, because there's not supposed to be anybody in your marriage. In Genesis, it tells you when you get married, you leave and you cleave. You get as close as you can to your spouse.
Right.
You can't get any closer to your spouse than when you're having sex.
Right.
When you're involved in sexual intercourse, you can't get any closer than that, physically or emotionally, for that matter. And then it guards against, and then in the verse there in Corinthians, it says that we're supposed to make sure that we're taking care of each other, so that the enemy can't get any foothold in your marriage. So there's no doubt or disbelief in your marriage in that way. Right. So to finish up on why this session is important, I want to just recap on something that you said a few times in the readings. It said sex in Christian marriage, right? So what we believe is that Christian marriage is a model for all marriages. Whether you're Christian or not, we believe that the way that God set up marriage and the way that He gives us instruction on how to be married works for anybody. If you follow if you follow the guidelines, if you follow the warnings, the admonitions, then your marriage will be better. Now, of course, we would rather you be Christian, but that's our personal belief. But marriage in itself, we believe, was set up by God, and He set it up so that it would be perfect. So, in that sense, the only sex that's in His will is in marriage. One of the things that you said when we were talking before is that, like you mentioned that you weren't a virgin, I wasn't a virgin when we got married, but it is God's will for you to be. So that you don't have all these other experiences that you have to overcome, so that you can find yourself in a good place with your spouse.
But there's still hope.
Oh, of course.
There's still hope.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's not hopeless. It's just an obstacle.
I mean, sin is sin is sin, right? So, okay, you didn't make this one. But there's still hope. A lot of people don't make it. Right.
But the goal is for it to be that way, so that this person, your spouse, is the one that you spend that time with. And how wonderful would that be? I know that there's a few people that have that. I'm sure there's more than a few. I know there's several people that have that experience. And it's the way that it should be. But if you happen to have had the sex, we're not saying that it's hopeless.
It's not hopeless, and that's
it's just
why
an obstacle. It's something to watch out for.
And that's why it's important that you like, share, and subscribe to our channel, because we hope that people are sharing with people who haven't yet had those experiences, so that they're better prepared to move forward in their adulthood.
Yes. Right. And finally, we said it lessens sexual temptation, right? One of the things that we know from the Bible is that your body is mine, my body is yours. And we are encouraged and admonished to make sure that we're taking care of each other. So if we can do that, then there's no room for dissension, discord, so that we can have a healthier relationship overall.
And it's not, your body is not mine, like I can do as I please to you without any thought for how you feel. Or my body's not yours and you can do anything you want to me without thought or consideration. It's not that kind of possession. It's
a matter of fact, it's not, I don't know if you would even call it possession as much as it's mutual submission. Yeah, it's not even possession, because I think we get mixed up. I'm glad you said it that way. I think we get mixed up, particularly men or husbands who maybe misread or maybe misunderstand. I think we get mixed up thinking that our wife is our possession.
Right.
She's your treasure. She's your privilege to have.
Right.
She's your favor, but she's not your possession. She belongs to God.
Right.
God is loaning you to me, and I have to take care of you.
Right.
Right. So it lessens sexual temptation, so you don't find yourself getting engaged in things that would hurt or hinder your marriage. So what should you expect in a session of premarital counseling or getting ready to get married when you're talking about sex? First of all, you should expect to talk about your ideas or thoughts about sex,
Right.
and how they developed, what happened maybe early in your childhood. You're not going to like lay on the couch and have a whole like therapy session about it, but how
whether
you
your parents talk to you,
whether your parents talk to you, how many of your friends told you misinformation or information about sex. So how your thoughts or ideas or feelings about sex developed.
Right.
Yeah. So that's should be what you should expect in this session. What else? You should explore the practicalities of sex in marriage.
Right.
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 Because people will say, "Oh, when you get married, your sex ends." Well, that's not true.
Right.
That's not true. But there are complications that come with marriage, and there's complications that come with, especially particularly when you have children, that may hinder the freedom that you have in having sex.
Well, most people call it your sex life, right? And like life, you go through many different phases or cycles or stages. Some stages last longer than others.
Right.
So you have to be prepared and understand that just like life, your sex life will go through stages.
Right.
But it doesn't always have to be that way.
Right. There may be there may be times where you have to schedule sex.
Okay.
And you think that's, and I said that, and you're like, well, that's not romantic at all. But you can feel romantic when the alert pop up on your phone. If you want
Right.
to. But you might have to schedule that, and depending on what's going on. And 2 more things you might want to discuss during these times is the importance of healthy sexual adjustment.
Right.
Right. So if you were a virgin when you got married, if you were not, you're still going to have to adjust to your spouse.
Right.
And a way to do that in a healthy way so that you can have an enjoyable sex life. Right. So there may be some things that you need to work out. There may be some things you need to figure out. But the adjustment that you'll have doing that. And most importantly there is your spouse is your barometer for what's good in your sex life.
Right, because a lot of times what we forget is if we've had sexual experiences before, we try to bring the sin into our marriage, or we try to bring a different sex life into a new sex life, and you can't merge two things like that together. Right? Yeah. And so you can't have what you had before. Right? It's a new thing.
Yes.
It's a new life.
Yes.
And so you have to start from zero.
Exactly. If you want it to be enjoyable and successful.
Right.
Now, if you just want to be miserable,
right,
then you can keep saying stuff like, "Oh, that's not how I used to like it." You better get over that.
Right. And I think this is where we're going to talk about it, but you can express, tell, and share with your spouse the things that you enjoy.
Yes.
But understand that they should be allowed to say, I'm not comfortable with that.
Right.
Or that's something that I may be comfortable with in the future. Or that's a hard no. I'm sorry.
Not doing that.
Not doing that.
Right.
Okay. Right. And so you have to leave space for successful communication.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. And again, your spouse is your guide for that.
Right, husbands and wives.
Husbands and wives.
Right, because a lot of times they make the assumption that the wife won't be okay with a lot of things.
Right.
But the husband needs to be free and in a place of safety, so he can be like, I'm not comfortable with that.
Right.
Okay, because I not.
Mm-hmm. So finally, something to consider as we're closing.
Right, and the thing that we want if you haven't heard anything else, we want you to understand that there's a purpose for sex.
Yes.
And God created it to be enjoyable.
Yes.
And in addition to that, the only type of sex that God says is within the kingdom is sex within marriage. Okay? And then finally, your sex life, your sexual intimacy will change and grow as your marriage changes and grows. So don't lose heart.
Right.
Sometimes might be rough.
Right.
No pun intended, right? But it may get challenging.
Right.
But there is hope at the end if you continue to learn, grow, and have good communication with your spouse.
Man.
So,
See you next time.